All right, everyone, welcome to our webinar for today from the Immigrant Council of Ireland. We are meeting for our second webinar on migrant voters and building grassroots mobilisation and looking at best practices. I should introduce myself to start. My name is Abby Ryan. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager with the Immigrant Council of Ireland, and I'm really delighted to be joined here today by our three panellists. So first of all, we have Teresa Buczkowska, who is the Political Participation Coordinator for the Immigrant Council of Ireland. Then we have son Olszewski, who is working with Pomoc in the UK. And finally, I have Yonous Muhammadi, who is with the Greek Forum for Refugees. So thank you to all three of you for joining us. I might start with introducing everyone's bios, if that's okay. And then I'm going to pass to Teresa, then Son, and then Yonous to give a presentation or talk for a few minutes each. And then we're going to have some questions and answers. So just from the start, you will see as participants, there is the questions and answers function available. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts from what anyone is saying at any point in time, please feel free to write them in there. And when everyone has done their pieces, we're going to come back and look at some of those comments and questions. I'm also really interested for the panelists to comment or ask questions on each other. So like when everyone has finished speaking, if there's something that you've heard that somebody else has said and you want to talk about it more or want to add something to it, please do that. So first of all, let me introduce Teresa. Teresa is a Polish-Irish community organizer with nearly 20 years of experience in building and leading teams to develop platforms for advancing immigrant and refugee inclusion. In 2021, Teresa was awarded a fellowship by the Social Change Initiative to explore frameworks for facilitating migrant leadership. And in 2022, Teresa left us in the Immigrant Council, very sadly, and was selected as one of the Obama scholars to study at Columbia University in New York. Teresa, we're really pleased to have you here. Son Olszewski is an organizer at Pomoc, a grassroots political home for Eastern European migrants in the UK to organize towards power, dignity, and justice, really important. And Son coordinates the We Vote campaign, which works to mobilize Eastern European migrants to vote in local and national elections. Prior to working in Pomoc, he has organized with migrant communities on issues relating to housing and the hostile environment. Son, thank you for being here with us also today. We're really looking forward to your input. And finally, we have Yonous Muhammadi. Yonous is the co-founder of the Greek Forum for Refugees and was elected its president in 2013. He's a member of the European Migration Forum in Brussels and of the National Council Against Racism in the Ministry of Justice in Greece. In 2024, he launched the Democracy for All campaign, which raises awareness of the importance of political participation of migrants and refugees. So three extremely qualified candidates to discuss best practice for migrant political mobilization. So I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. And Teresa, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Abby. And I want to give a moment of appreciation to your ability to pronounce Polish names. I gave Abby a crash course just before me and Son joined the meeting because there is a lot of Polish names today present in this panel. So well done, Abby, there. So today, what we are talking about best practices in grassroots mobilization for political participation. Last week, we had a panel around how to best build the ecosystem to support political participation. So those two panels are complementing each other, and we will be releasing videos for both of those panels soon, so you can always go back to them. And the purpose we are doing that is about planning our work for future, because we finished local elections in Ireland, but this is not time for us to take a break. It's time for us to evaluate and then regroup and start our work again for the next election cycle, because we cannot wait until 2029. We should be starting working on that immediately. So what am I going to do? I'm going to talk to you today about what we've learned in Ireland, what's been done so far, what are the practices in Ireland, what works well and what doesn't work well. But before we do that, I want to ask you all a question, and I want to also involve people in the audience. So use the Q&A box to give me your answer. So I want to ask you the question, do you remember how old were you when you voted for the very first time? So if people in the audience, please put your answers in the Q&A boxes, and then I'm gonna ask the panel here to unmute themselves and tell me, do you remember how old were you when you voted for the very first time? We have somebody saying 18 in the box. Who else? Abby, how old were you when you voted for the very first time?
I'll be honest, I don't remember. I know I could vote from 18, and I know that I was most upset that at 17 or 16 for me, there was a referendum in Ireland that changed how people who were born in the country, whether they would become citizens or not, but I wasn't old enough to vote in it. I was very upset. But I don't remember exactly how long after 18 I first voted.
Okay. So we have different answers coming in. Some people are saying 18, some people say 22 maybe, some people say 17. Well, the very first time I voted, I was 7. So here's the story behind my voting at the age of 7. My mom has 5 children, but we only had 1 TV. So to avoid violence and unrest in the family, my mom introduced voting system, and that is democracy. Democracy is a method for making collective decisions about our life. But so now, again, asking you this question, do you remember how old were you when you voted for the very first time? Perhaps at school, perhaps in your family, perhaps in your group of friends, voting where are we going out tonight or what we're going to eat. We are voting every day. Voting is an essential part of our day-to-day life. The problem is that when we are moving from our private life to our public life, somehow our connection to voting is being lost, and people don't feel that our public life also deserves the same level of engagement from us in terms of making decisions for our future. We are not voting in a public life every day. We are voting every 4 or 5 years. And this is a very important decision because we just voted in Ireland for local and European elections, and we've made a decision that bounds us all for the next 5 years. And we don't have any other choices in between now and 2029. So this choice that we're making now, we are bound by that choice for the next 5 years. So that's why when I am educating people about the voting right, when I'm going outside to our communities, I always start with this question, do you remember how old were you? Because people always think about voting connected to public voting, but that's not, but we should reverse the order. We should be first thinking about our private life and then extend that to public life, and then build that bridge between our private life and public life. So Immigrant Council of Ireland, we've been working in this space, mobilizing migrant voters, probably since 2013. This was the first evidence when I found, that was before even I joined Immigrant Council. I joined in September 2013, and I remember there was I found the evidence of information campaign that year, but it was in springtime. So we are in this space for more than 10 years, and we're doing a lot of work in this area. And we started really focusing on this work around 2016, 2017. And this is my here personal story with Yonous, when we've met together at the Transatlantic Migrant Democracy Dialogue, which was a group of migrant and refugee leaders from Europe and US that came together and started talking about power building through electoral participation, but also through leadership. And this is when we seriously started working on this issue in Ireland in 2016, 2017. And when we started working on that issue in Ireland, at that time, not that many people invested time and resources into electoral mobilization of migrants, not that many migrant rights organizations. That's been considered as a luxury because there is so many pressing needs in this system, in this sector, and very limited resources. So very hard decision has to be made about where do we allocate our resources. So people had to make a decision: are we allocating that for voters mobilization, or are we allocating that in caseworking, for example? And that decision sometimes was going toward different areas. But I'm happy to see that this election season, pretty much everyone was hands-on on voters mobilization. And that's great to see. That's great to see that we are embedding voter mobilization in our work. However, there are also certain things that we should be perhaps reflecting about how do we do it to make it more effective and go beyond just box ticking exercise, because sometimes when we're doing certain things, they are not effective and they look great on paper, but actually we're not bringing as much results. So I'm going to talk to you today about what are my observations from the work that I've been doing for the last 10 years in this area, and where should we be going. And then I want also looking forward to listen to our other panelists to hear what are the practices in other countries, and especially that we have certain gaps in our knowledge, in our practices, and our approach. And that's why I, for example, invited Son Olszewski, because in the work in Ireland, Eastern Europeans are somehow missing from the equation, from the discussion in around political participation. And on the other hand, as well, with Yonous' experiences, we not necessarily have a lot of knowledge about trauma-informed organizing within refugee communities. And that is also a very specific way of organizing. So I'm looking forward to hearing from those experiences. When I talk about educating migrants about their voting rights, I always telling people that this is essentially trust building exercise, because it is about enabling people to believe and help them understand how they can occupy democratic spaces as migrants. And when I'm talking about building confidence and building people's trust, it's not about personal confidence, because as a speaker at our last webinar last week said that migrants have a lot of personal confidence, but when we're talking about occupying democratic spaces, about public life, that confidence not always might be there. So when we're talking about trust building and building confidence, we're talking about building confidence in the public spaces. And I only recently sort of come across theoretical conceptualization of what I observed in my day-to-day work. And I come across this term called political imagination. Saying that migrants sometimes are missing, lacking political imagination. What does it mean? Political imagination is our perception of us, who we are as political agents, how much power we have or don't have as political agents, how much political actors are interested in us as opposed to the reality. So political imagination is our perception, and it's of the context in which we are operating, and whether that context is motivating us to be politically active, or that context is discouraging us from being politically active. So when people are saying, because when you look at statistics, and the statistics are brutal, because when you look at the rate of voter registration among migrant communities, it's very low. And people sometimes take this as an indication saying migrants are not interested in politics, but that's not true. Migrants are not politically active because we believe sometimes that politics are not interested in us, like politicians are not interested in us, like political parties are not interested in us, other stakeholders are not interested in us. And that is that the element of that political imagination that is stopping us from engaging in politics, because we believe that it doesn't matter, it makes no changes in our life. A few years ago, I was invited to take part in a discussion around expanding voting rights to migrants in Portugal. And there was a think tank there that made this briefing paper that's sent to all participants ahead of that discussion. And they use this like describing what what supports migrant political participation and what stops them from political participation. And they use this term saying aspiration gap, saying like migrants don't have aspiration to become politically active. And that was so offensive for me, because I said, like, this is exactly the language that stops us from being politically active. Because if somebody says me, I have no aspiration, I feel like, okay, perhaps my aspirations are wrong, because maybe perhaps I shouldn't, because perhaps because nobody is waiting for my, like, expecting aspirations from me. So it's not that we have aspiration gap, we have political imagination gap. And our work essentially is about building political awareness and bridging that gap of political imagination within migrant communities. How do we do it? So first of all, obviously language is very important. And when we are talking to people, obviously different context requires different language. Talking about democracy, talking about participation, talking about having the right to vote as a democratic basic democratic right, not always is the right language when you are working on a grassroots level. This is a language that is important for policymakers, but when you're talking to migrants, sometimes it's about saying what politics is about. So it's about, for example, public transport, telling people like, actually, who is deciding about public transport? Politicians, and most migrants use public transport to get to work. So if you are stuck in commute for 2 hours every day because the public transport doesn't work to your benefit, that is political decision. So it's about changing the language. It's about making sure that we are bringing the politics into daily experiences, that people understand that politics and democracy is about our daily life. The same as I started with my opening question. Do you remember how old were you when you were voting for the very first time? Making that connection between politics and a daily life. Another important thing is about meeting place. And I've heard that a lot from people saying, like, meet people where they are. A lot of migrant rights organizations organize these voter registration drives, saying, on this day, we're going to be in that place, please come and register. That not necessarily works, because people die is sometimes a barrier as well, because people not always have the capacity to make a space in the daily routine to go to the place where you are to register. But also, so obviously going to the places where people are is important, but also what I've noticed is going to the places where people are trapped in a way. So place where they have no other place to go to. So what do I mean by that, right? So I experimented with outreach practices this year. I went to Polish church to register Polish people. That wasn't that effective because people were going to a mass. So yes, I went to the place where people were. I met them at the place where they were, but they didn't have capacity and time to talk to me because they were rushing to go to the church. And then after the mass, they were rushing to go to home. So that wasn't very effective. But when I went to a Polish Saturday school, complimentary Saturday school, and parents, when they came to collect children after the school, and they were standing in the parking spot, car park, they had nowhere else to go. They had to be there. They had to wait until the children came out. That was very effective. People had time because there was nothing else to do, so they were engaging with me, talking about that, and I could really see that there was high level of interest amongst Polish people learning about their voting rights. And also, if you are organizing an event and inviting people, those people who are coming to you, those are potential organizers. Those are people that you can use in future to spread that, to educate them and spread that news further. But ordinary people, again, you have to go where they are. So I also went to English classes. I asked the teachers if I can go to the class that they're delivering. Again, people have nothing else to do. They have to be in that class, so they will listen to you and they will engage with you. So meeting place is very important. Meet people where they are, but also meet them where they have time to dedicate to you. Now, the next thing is information. What kind of information we're giving to people? And I've noticed from this year particularly that we've made a lot of mistakes in terms of educating people about voting rights without educating them how to vote. And I've met people in my workshops who were informed by other migrant rights organizations that they have voting rights, but they didn't know how to vote. And the Irish voting system is very specific with the transferable votes. When we give numbers as opposed to single vote, we rank our candidates. And that was a missed opportunity because a lot of people knew that they can vote, but they didn't know how to vote. And then I also met grassroots organizers, migrant grassroots organizers who were registering people to vote. Again, they didn't know how to vote because nobody taught them how to vote. So the information has to be very comprehensive. Everything has to be given to people on that day. Otherwise, their votes will be spoiled. And in 2019, when there was the last local elections, 108,000 votes were spoiled because people didn't know how to correctly fill in the ballot paper. This year around, that number was limited by 30%. I think that's what Art said last week, which is effective because we amended our education system as well when it comes to voting rights. The next thing is support with voting. So there is a difference between educating people to vote and people actually going to the ballot boxes. So a lot of people registered and not everyone is going to the ballot boxes. Why? Sometimes people forget, sometimes people need additional encouragement. So my colleagues, in this particular election, we had a group of three women, 3 migrant women working with our communities. We were on the phone on the election day, a few days before the election day, reminding people about voting on that day, sending messages, sending emails, and sending WhatsApp messages. But also what was something that we also need to work on is actual helping people find a confidence to engage with voting system. And I'm going to bring here an example of my mom, because my mom is my role model when it comes to participation in democracy. She taught me about voting, not only on the family matter, but also in public spaces. My mom is 72. She lives in UK. She can't speak English, but she votes in UK because she has voting rights in the local elections there. The first time she went to the voting station, she asked a friend to go with her because she didn't know the language. She was lacking confidence. She didn't know what if they ask me a question. She didn't know how the process will look like. So we need to also organize that support. So in education, we have to show people step by step how that system is going to look like, how that process is going to look like, or organize support on the election day. And then the last thing I want to talk about is ongoing support. So we cannot expect people to be politically active if we start educating them 4 weeks ahead of election. People are not stupid. People know that we are only in this space because it's election and we want their votes. People expect us to be in that space continuously and providing support continuously and talking continuously. So there is a space for migrant rights organizations to become political houses where people can continuously find motivation, inspiration, information, and especially learning about political system and political parties, because the number one question I got, which I couldn't answer, was which political party represents migrant rights. We have to be independent as an organization, so we cannot say that, but we can provide information on an ongoing basis saying, this is the political agenda of that political party, this is the political agenda of that political party, and educating people about issues that they, around migration or issues that they have in their community life, so people can make their own decision about voting. But also encouraging people to educate themselves about democracy, because democracy doesn't happen on its own. Democracy needs work. Democracy needs effort. And again, example of my mom. My mom cannot speak English, but she is using Google Translate to learn about political candidates in her local area, so she can make an informed decision when she is voting. So if my mom at 72 can make that effort to educate herself about democracy, everyone can do that. But we need to give people ideas how they can do that. Encourage them to learn about politics and politicians and political parties, and do that on an ongoing basis. Because educating yourself 4 weeks before election, when everyone is promising you the sky, and everything above, it's not the best time. It's actually educating yourself throughout the 5 years before the election to actually see the track record of a political party and a candidate and to see whether you want to vote for that person. There are also, last thing before I finish, there are also gaps in our knowledge. We have very little experience and knowledge about digital organizing, for example. As I've mentioned already, trauma-informed organizing, this is something that also we don't know. And sometimes barging into spaces where vulnerable migrants and refugees are occupying with your information saying, we're going to teach you about democracy, is actually more harmful than actually more helpful. So we need to learn about that as well. And yeah, and I'm gonna finish here and I'm gonna wait for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm going to encourage people to put your questions and your comments in the Q&A. I already have a bunch of things written down for when we come to that later. So great input from you. Thank you so much. I'm not going to pause for questions and comments now. If that's okay, I'm going to move on to Sun first. So Sun and then Yonous. The floor is yours. We're really interested to hear about the work that you're doing in the UK. So please.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks so much, Teresa, for what you just said. I really love that question about when was the first time that you wrote it. And it's so something that, with your permission, I'd love to like implement on my end. I think just to pick up on that, or by way of an anecdote, the moment we come into spaces and talk about elections or politics with all the association of the establishment, the government, and all of that, our communities or the ones that I've met have been put off. But it's relating voting to the everyday decisions that you make, but also to come to the understanding that politics is everything we do, right? There is no us outside of politics. I mean, there's probably many different reasons why people have that fear, and that wasn't really what I was going to address or why they're so hesitant. But I think communities that struggle for survival probably dedicate so much, all the energy that they have to the very means of survival, to looking after their kids, their families, working, resisting the hostile environment, struggling in a collapsing economy. So I think we connect only in the kind of personal space and reject. And that's kind of the experience of my parents too. I grew up in the Czech Republic. The Vietnamese community there was pretty large, super politically disenfranchised, but extremely political, just not probably self-described as political. We cared for one another. We crafted communities when the system didn't allow us to. We walked each other to the GP and to schools and helped each other translate resources because others couldn't. And all of these acts were political acts, and all of these changes were changes that we could have demanded of the system. But I think we just didn't have the energy to. But anyway, so kind of very quickly on Pomoc, as I was introduced, we are a grassroots political home for Eastern European migrants. We take a very kind of broad vision of what it is that we want, and we frame it around the terms of organizing towards dignity, power, and justice, where we all have the freedom to move, affirm our bodies and identities, and power and the resources to determine our future. So that's kind of how we kind of put forward our vision. We do provide direct support. So we came about during Brexit, when we quickly had to shift towards EUSS work, right? So this is immigration advice, political education. So yeah, hosting events on various issues, campaigns, a lot of campaigning work. So at the moment we're working around housing, obviously the election, and then leadership development. So we believe in the power of ordinary people to lead, to change their lives and the lives of the communities around them. So we kind of invest in people that I meet during outreach and believe in their capacity to lead their own communities, their families and people around them, to change. Yeah. Anyway, so around our election work. So I might have mentioned that we came about during Brexit, but our earliest work was in fact mobilizing around the Polish election in 2018. So our directors are both Polish citizens. Abortion rights obviously were a big topic. And there was a big Polish diaspora, there is a big Polish diaspora here. And they identified a gap and thought that actually there's so many of us here in the UK and we should have a say about abortion rights in Poland. Anyway, so that's kind of where we began. And then since we yearly, essentially, well, 2021, 2022, and then 23 and 24, organized around local and general elections. At first, we focused mostly on on Polish communities, in particular women and gender non-conforming people. I think that's kind of our general organizational commitment to supporting the capacity of women to lead in their families and in the communities around them. So that was the kind of initial choice that we made. We also believe that, I mean, this is maybe a reflection on my own home, but like if I wanted to win my family over any issue, I first need to win my mom. Like, I can win my brother over, but he's not going to have the same influence as she does. So I better win her over. And I think that's kind of a broader organizing strategy, but like, yeah. But in this cycle, we expanded our focus to work with Eastern European communities more broadly. Obviously, only kind of EU citizens have the right to vote in local elections. And just in terms of capacity, we only chose to work with 3 nationalities, that being Polish, Romanian, and a bit of work with Bulgarian communities, just because it didn't make sense to like try to spread ourselves too thin. Okay, so how we do it, and maybe actually this goes back to what you said, Teresa, we believe in like long-term and sustained engagement. It clearly doesn't work to just like pick up, start doing the work a couple of months before the election. At that point, it's too late. People, well, if I just start working just before the election, people are probably too sick of all of the coverage anyway, right? So they might see it on normal news as well as on their like respective community news. So people read Polish magazines and all of that. People might get loads of leaflets, all of that. I think there is a kind of democracy fatigue issue, as well as a lack of understanding issue, as well as a lack of trust issue, right? Who will want to speak to me if 3 weeks before the election I just show up? I think there is a general sense that I have an agenda and our agendas might not align. Yeah. So that this is kind of the long-term work. That also goes to the kind of leadership development work, by the way. Right. So I think this is to step back, like a comment about organizing in general. I think we recognize as an organization that we've got a certain number of staff that might come from the respective communities that we organize with, but only by way of identity or perhaps by way of like cultural similarities or shared histories, but not necessarily by way of existing relationships and existing relationships of trust. That means that actually through this like leadership identification approach, what we do is we go to where people are and identify people that we might be able to engage with for whatever reason, and work with them and build their capacity to mobilize and engage politically the community around them, because they actually have that existing level of trust, right? So one that's just like more efficient. And if we're talking about reaching scale, then we have to do it like that. There is no way that like a team of, let's say, 11 actually manages to build relationships with 1.6 million Romanian voters in the UK and 1.4 million Polish people in the UK. It's not going to happen, nor should it happen, right? Like there are already existing relationships, so let's work with them. So that's why it's long-term anyway. So, but around election cycles, we take a mixed and multiple approach. So we do what in organizing terms we would call structure-based organizing. So again, identifying community hubs where people already are, rather than kind of trying to walk around the street and like hotspot Eastern European languages. We actually meet in places where communities gather, and again, identify leaders there who we hope to work with to register and mobilize the community there. So we, like Teresa said, we go to Saturday schools, we go to local Eastern European shops where loads of people hang around, and like kind of places where people gather. And so a lot of the kind of earlier phase of this work is just like going around and mapping out all of the places where we think people gather. It's how in other places you do so faith-based organizing. So you said earlier that actually churches don't work, and this year round I didn't do that much work with churches, but like in kind of my previous work, or in previous work, this was not on elections, but my colleagues do it in election stuff. We develop relationships with the faith-based institution, and that institution then encourages its members, its community to register, right? So yes, perhaps standing outside wouldn't be a very efficient strategy because people will go in and then go out, but developing that relationship with a community leader within that faith space, and then getting them to talk to people about what it is that they care about and what it means to like think politically or dream politically is a strategy. So, and this is, by the way, in the UK, what a lot of also Muslim communities do, right? So there we, like with a partner organization, we did do a campaign that was called Promote the Migrant Vote. And there we worked through a lot of mosques and things like that. So that's structure-based organizing. Leadership identification I mentioned, and then we also do traditional political engagement strategies. So I've looked at census data to identify broadly where Eastern communities are, and then do a lot of canvassing, door knocking, constant outreach means like days and days on the streets with leaflets and just having simple conversations. It's not probably the efficiency of each individual conversation in terms of registration or changing someone's mind is minimal, but through that conversation, I hope to identify people that I can then organize with long-term, right? So it's then like, oh, okay, you seem interested, or we connected on some level. And then let's get a coffee in like a week's time, and then let's see what we can do together. Through this practice, we've identified so many people that then volunteered with us and did canvassing with us, or then took resources through their local communities and then organized picnics and invited their friends and families and neighbors, where we, well, had fun as well as talk politics, right? Talk politics in this like, not what party do you vote for, but like, what is it like to be an Eastern European migrant in the UK? Or like, what is it that bothers you? Like, all of these things. And then you kind of engage on that level. And we also do digital work. So on digital organizing, digital work is interesting, I think. Like, so I think there is a difference between digital work and then digital organizing. Digital work tends to be just straightforward ads. You try to do like catchy posters that grab people's attention around issues that they care about. In this cycle, what worked for us most was one, citizenship costs. So in the general election. So we did this like jokey ad around like, my right to vote costs £1,500. How much is your vote worth, right? That's about how much it costs to get citizenship, excluding fees that you pay to lawyers or different routes to settlement. And then Brexit still hits home for our communities. There's also obviously other issues, like when I did actual just like normal canvassing and like talking to people, it was things like the cost of living and like all of those things that they cared about, but it didn't drive the same kind of like one anger or attention or humor that this kind of like citizenship fee thing and the Brexit thing did. And the reason why like in this digital outreach work was important is that it drives engagement. So when people comment loads and talk about this thing, it boosts our ads. So this is like just purely digital work. Digital organizing, what we wanted to do more of, but didn't manage to get around to, relies on. So I think the difference is that in digital organizing, I use digital things, ads and stuff, to reach people. but I try to actually be able to stay in contact with people. So our ads just directed people to the government website to register to vote. Ideally, digital organizing approach, the ads would direct them to something where I can then contact them again, i.e. they give me their email address, and then I can build that relationship with them and do this like organizing at scale, essentially, right? So imagine, for example, you've got some form of catchy ad introducing who you are or whatever, and that takes you to a platform. Like that's actually how a lot of campaigning works, right? Like you do sign a petition, you actually, part of the petition exercise is collecting information so that you can then like build power with people. The reason why we couldn't do it is that we were trying to hit registration numbers, but if in between we asked people to fill out a form, we worried that the dropout rate between like that someone seeing an ad, filling out a form, and then registering would be too high, and then we defeat the purpose of registering. Like wouldn't be successful in registering. Some like learnings and challenges, right? This is like dry and, yeah, anyway. Learnings and challenges. There's a lot of misinformation about eligibility and registration rules. I think that's partly because people are allowed to vote in local elections, but not in general elections. That creates confusion. Some people might have registered ages ago and now forgot that they had to register. And then like in community platforms, people just spread this information constantly. So in so many Facebook groups, we just saw people like really being like very confident that they could vote in general elections as European citizens, even though we directed them to like resources, right? Which probably also says something about the level of trust that people have with an organization like ours. So this was just like on a Facebook group, and they didn't trust us enough to trust that the information that we provided was legitimate. There's also like voter registration is unnecessarily complex. So in our registration drives, I mean, so to register, you need national insurance number, which not everyone has on hand. Like if you found me on the street and asked me to register to vote, and I had to give you my national insurance number, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would have to go home and look, right? If that could be simplified, I mean, I was talking to other people in the sector, and we're hoping that the DWP, for example, who holds national insurance numbers in the UK, could provide us with a like quick platform update where people just fill out their address, date of birth, and get their national insurance number online. So these are the kind of simple things. Lack of understanding about, and so another kind of bit about the complexity of the political and electoral system is there's a lack of understanding about the relationship between local and central government, meaning, and why that is important is that people don't really get why local elections are important. I didn't get why local elections are important. It was the first election I voted in, but I only voted in because all of my friends were voting. And, you know, but local government is super important in the UK, though its role is probably decreasing as power is more centralized, right? But and I think also the big things that matter in people's lives, especially to migrant communities, are not decisions of the local authority, such as migration fees, cost of living very often is like out of the control of the local government. Not every, you know, cost of living is a broad thing. Things like that. NHS waiting times, right? Like NHS waiting times is what the government talks about, not what local government talks about. Lack of representation is a big thing. Like there's no Romanian MP that I know of, and only a few Romanian local councillors. There are a few Polish MPs, sorry, Polish and Romanian. I mean, people with Romanian and Polish backgrounds. They might be like second, third generation. Maybe there might be one, and there's a few Polish councillors. Then at like an organizational level, organization meaning from my perspective, unpredictable election cycles make this work super difficult. I mean, this year we had May elections, and then suddenly, next thing you know, 2 weeks later, we had the prime minister announced the general election, right? So there was a quick turnaround. All of our plans of people doing this work in the sector were meant to be for the summer, and suddenly we had to do everything really early. So I wanted to do more like institutional, like relationship-based work, and had to shift super digital because I just had no time to do it. And then there's also, but I think, external constraints. So much like you said, Teresa, as charities, we can't necessarily be party political. So that, but people do want to know more about parties. So there's that's one thing. The other thing too, though, I think, is that people vote because they care about issues. And what works most is when we actually talk to people about issues, even if we don't necessarily tell people who to vote for directly. But let's say I produce content that says, these are these parties' views on XYZ issues, compare them. I don't say who they should vote for, but I do a comparison. That, in theory, is work that is regulated, which is fine. We can do that as a charity. But within the funding space, it might be more difficult. So there's also these things, right? So on some level, like, we want to meet people where they're at. That's most effective organizing wise. But in this like political economy of like nonprofit work, we're not always able to do all of that. And I understand where that comes from, right? And so this is like a broader critique of like actually civil society as a whole, that it depends on like philanthropic funding that needs to be more neutral than it, you know, and all of that stuff. Though obviously I'm super grateful that I actually can do what I care about, right? So, you know, so there's that. Just like I think by way of a final comment, on political imagination. I don't know that it is migrant. I don't know that migrant communities lack political imagination. I mean, yes, they do, but we all do, right? Like, we all lack political imagination. We demand so little of the system, and we believe so little that the system can change and change meaningfully, right? Like, we tinker around the edges and we kind of hope that things could be marginally better. But the marginally better often is not sufficient to actually like motivate people to action. And the reason why that is important is that if we look at the election in Poland, for example, people, women and queer people managed to build a lot of hope in getting out the Peace Party and getting out a homophobic and like anti-abortion party, and people mobilized. But migrant communities here in the UK at the moment do not believe that Labour is going to be that much better. My communities, my queer communities, we do not believe that trans people will have it better under a next Labour government necessarily. It might be slightly better, but there's not sufficient hope, right? You know, so this like active imagination is like this like structural thing. It's like we just think the system acts on us, and we rarely think that we can act on the system. And like, why should we think it, at least in the UK, where we have essentially a two-party system, and neither party proposes solutions that work for young people, for migrants, for queer people, for so many people, and currently also on Gaza. So yeah, I mean, that's just like, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sun. Again, lots of thoughts coming to me, and I have many questions to raise. I see some comments coming in through the Q&A, so I'm going to encourage you to put in more comments and questions there. But before we get to those, I'm going to hand over to Yonous. Sorry that you're last. We might come back to you towards the start of some of the questioning, but we would be really delighted to hear what you have to say about your experience in Greece.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and nice to meet you, Abby and Sam and Teresa. One more, I'm really happy to see you here, and I'm enjoying when you are speaking about your experience and also what you have done. Okay, and also I'm sorry for my language, because I don't have the privilege that you have. Your English is really, it is, but it is better for me. I remember that the first years back in 2008-9, I didn't know at all English. It was so difficult for me participating in different discussions. I remember in the first workshop which I participated in Brussels. So actually, I didn't know nothing when I participated in the workshop. And I had a machine. I remember that machine, that recording machine, I bought it in 180 euro, which was good to record it from far away. So And at night when I come back to the hotel, the others were going to dinners, and just I started to translate it. We have a translation book on that time, of course. So, and then I understood at night that what was actually the workshop about. So it was really difficult. As you mentioned, the language, also the language is really, really important. That after getting better in language, and then really I feel that I'm included. Otherwise, always you feel that you are not included when you don't know the language, actually. So, and also starting from what you mentioned, Teresa, as my personal experience in voting, actually, in 2019, for the first time I voted. I had the right to vote, ever in my life. So I didn't have the right to vote, actually, even as you said, in the family. So as you know, I have come from a society which is Afghanistan, actually, exclusion, and also the lack of a participatory system, which is not just in institutional level, and also in social level, and also in family level also. So it is, I think, the basic problems, that the things are changed from the family, from the neighbors, from the society, and it goes to the system, which is one of the problems even in my country. So when I was actually, what was the first time I was voting, and for 2-3 days, I remember that I was worried. I couldn't sleep, and I didn't know, and I was worried how to vote, because we had 4 elections in one day. It was regional, national, local, and also European election in 2019. At the same time, I was candidate also. So it was a huge concern for me, that how I can find the ball box, and also how to fill the paper, and how to find it, and if the people, they know me that I'm a candidate and I don't know how to vote. And also another important thing, which I think that you didn't mention, it was the narrative, the negative narrative, or not negative. It is the very wrong narrative that exists in the society still, especially in Greek society, that still we have. So even this year that I was voting for the second time, so I feel that people were looking very surprisingly, that why another kind of face or another kind of color that they are voting here. So it is really important. So all these concerns, because we have, with my friend, a writer, we have written a book for the life of a person in a life in war, and also as a migrant in Europe. So all this, my concern about voting, she has written it as it was happened. So when I read it, really, I feel that it is something that it would happen for a person that they, for the first time voting, if they don't know how to do. So it is really the concern. And also to not forget the experience of being a migrant and being a candidate. I think it is challenging, especially in a country like Greece, that always there is a narrative that if you are migrant, if you are refugee, you are excluded. It is very normal. So, and you are second-class citizens. So that is very, unfortunately, it is accepted. It is really difficult. And I remember that 2 times, I cannot say that I was arrested, but I was stopped at the airport. That I was running for election campaign. So just they stopped me that, yeah, you are very familiar face, and we are worried that you are a trafficker. So they were stopping me actually at the airport. So one of them, it was really, really interesting that the person, he called the police, and just I was waiting that what would happen actually. So, and the police, they brought a book with the picture and the name of traffickers and criminals actually, and they came close to me, and they were feeding actually every picture, and especially if the name was Muhammad, they were, and without hair, bald, so they were bringing close to my face if I'm really one of that. So when they finished, and they said that no, he is not trafficker, or he is not criminal. And then I took out my my campaign card, and I gave to this police, to this security person. I said that now you couldn't find something, that please if you can vote for me. So it was really a surprise for him as well. And he started to lose even all the thing. And he said, sorry and everything. So it was the way that at the end that I should also say that, yeah, of course, and also in my speech, I had people that they were coming and listening, and I had some cases that they came to me that, okay, you are a very nice person and you are speaking, what you are speaking about, it is really nice, but you should go to your country. Look, it was also at the end of some speech that we were hearing that. So I think these are the experience that now with new campaign that we are running, we try to collect all these experiences from different campaign runners and from different peoples that they were candidate with migrants and refugee background in order to see the challenge, opportunities and everything and what happened. And of course, it was for me, it was important in all campaign to show that people should not vote for me just because I'm migrant. You know, we have, of course, people that they are pro-migrant, pro-refugees, that you are from Afghanistan, you're a refugee migrant, and we love refugees, we love migrants. So what I was asking people that, no, I don't want you to love me because just I'm migrants and refugees. So just you should listen to me and what is my position and what can I do. It should be the criteria of voting for people. So it was my concern actually, and always I was putting this in my speech in every cities and islands. So I was speaking about that. And I'm happy that actually it was the vote that I got. It was out of my imagination. So it was really a surprise for me. So I was looking that even my friend and communities, we were taking that, yeah, maybe I can take 5,000-6,000 votes. It was okay. But finally, I got close to 20,000 votes. So it was actually the start point for me and for my community. We say that there is hope. So of course we have the problem here in this society, and we should start and we should do, and we should speak about political participation. We should speak about all the things more seriously about this. I think, San, you said also, I think that most of the time communities are not taking seriously the political participations. And I think it is the most important that we should do that. I entered to this discussion and forgot to say about my organization and myself also. So it was, and also it relates how our organization was started. Our organization is Greek form of refugees. It was started as a movement of asylum seekers actually back in 2002 when I came as an asylum seeker in Greece. So we were sleeping in the park. There was no the asylum system. There was no reception center. So the only option for asylum seekers were just sleeping in the park. So it was a question for me because actually I came for Greece. I was one of the most limited individuals that they decided to stay in Greece. So for me, because I was in different movements in my country for justice, in universities, everything. So I have heard about Greece, about Europe, about democracy that was started from Greece actually. So it is, so for me, it was a question that how it comes that in this country that you are coming and actually no one asking you that why you are sleeping in the park. Of course, we had solidarity in terms of food, blanket, or bringing people, you are, but no one asked that why we came here. So it was the question for us that we, a group of asylum seekers, we said that we should react to this. We didn't come for food here. We didn't come for a blanket here. For us, it is protection, international protection. We are asylum seekers, but why no one is questioning this? So actually, by these questions, we started our movements from 5 people, and then we started with the communities of different countries of origin that asylum seekers were there. And then, of course, we had this big movement of asylum seekers and refugees, of course, with the supports of local movements, social movements with us. Of course, as every movement, they have a life cycles that our movement also, it had a life cycle. Sometimes after the achievements that we had having an asylum system and having some reception centers, we said that maybe it is the time that we should finish with this movement. Of course, the need is always there, is the need of organizing. organizing of communities, and also the need of representation. What was the biggest problem that we had, that we said that we should have a representation and agency in order to be present on the table of discussions and little by little on the table of decision-making process. That was the issue for us. And actually, our organization was officially established in 2012. We started in 2008. In 2012, we got our registration number from the first instance court in Athens. So actually, I live in a country, Greece, which is a problematic country. Frankly, I should speak with you that it is a country that, unfortunately, the authorities, different kind of government that has been passed from so long time that I'm there, that all this government has perceived that country, that Greece is a passage country for migrants and refugees, but not as a destination. That is the biggest problem that we have. Unfortunately, we know that the politicians and media, they create the narratives in the society also, that I see that this has been perceived by society even, that, okay, migrants and refugees, they are coming and they are leaving. Of course, because of the needs of the job market, so some people, they should stay just for work. So that is something I think that it is the biggest problem that we have. That is why we don't have at all an integration policy. We have a deterrent policy, that how to push people to leave. It is, when we speak about political participation, of course, the first step is the social integration. It means that something that you should have as integration, as a plan, as a strategy in the country. Unfortunately, we lack this. We don't have this. So it is what we are. But it doesn't mean that we are disappointed. Of course, as I told you, that in our life of our organization, we are happy that we started from 2017 and 16. We started to speak very clearly about political participation. And I remember in 2011 that we were invited by a political party before the election, that this party was actually the government at that time. So in a discussion, it was the question that we asked, that why you don't have in your list of candidates people with migrants and refugee background. The answer that we had at that time, that it was said that it has political cost. We cannot put this. So we were on that level at that time. Of course, we have improved the situation. There is a big steps that have been taken, that now in every elections, that we have so many calls from different parties, especially progressive parties, that they are calling us, please, we need some candidates from the communities to be candidate with the elections. So there is a change, but the problem is the tokenism and also the symbolic participation. This is the biggest problem that we have. Of course, in 2014, in 2019, we had so many candidates with the parties, but a great improvement that I believe, which is that this year in 2014, that one of the good experience that I can say that we have, that this year, although we had calls from the parties to find candidates for their lists, and we had rejection for all these demands from all communities. They said that, no, we don't want to participate because we don't want to participate just to have a symbolic role in these lists, to decorate the lists of these candidates. So I think it is a big improvement. It means that it is an opportunity for us also, in order to mobilize communities, to say how important is political participation, generally inclusion and active participation in all levels of the society, and how important is to try for a meaningful inclusion. It means that how we can achieve a meaningful and inclusion and access to the table of decision making there, not just at the list of candidacy. That is the issue. That's why we have our new campaigns by name of Democracy for All, which is actually a call for participatory democracy, and also a call for democratization of democracy. I think it is very important to speak that now we don't have a democracy or a democratic political system. That is the problem. It is not that we as peoples with migrants and refugee background that we are speaking about. It is that politicians themselves that they are speaking about. That is why I think that it is an opportunity for us as communities also to put this agenda of meaningful participation, political participation, and the agenda of politicians and governments and decision makers. I don't know if you read, and just before 2 days, the previous Prime Minister of Greece, that he in Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, I think he proposed how to strengthen democracy. One of the way that he was strengthening democracy, it is how to strengthen participatory process, how to choose participatory process in terms of in our society in all levels. So I think it is not just when we speak about democracy, when we speak about the problem in democracy, it is not just for us as migrants and refugees. And if we want our problems, which is not just our problems, these problems of exclusions, to be discussed in the society, let's speak this problem as a problem of the society. We should find coalitions in the society with the other parts of society, with civil society organizations, and with universities, with artists, with everyone. It is what actually now with our campaign that we try to create such kind of movement. I can say that movements that calling for an inclusive and participatory democracy, and call for democratization of politics. Actually, we don't have a democratic political system. It is not just for us with migrants and refugee background. We have Romas, we have other groups of people that they are excluded. I think we will have problem, of course, when the democracy is not for all, it is not working actually, and the society will have problem. And to not forget also that we should think also as a European Union. As a union also, we will not be a democratic European Union if one member state like Greece, like Hungary, like other countries, if they are violating the basic human rights, which is participation and inclusion in decision-making process. So it is democracy. I think to put all this on our table. I don't know what else I should think. I think it is better to give more floors to the participants and to put questions. It is very important to when there is question to answer. And by the end, I should say that one thing that I enjoyed too much in the time that I was candidate, it was when I was stopped 2 times by groups of people, especially students, because the party that I was candidate, it was the government actually. So they had put our photos at the central the square and at the center of Athens. So I visited this place and to see how is the situation. So actually 2-3 days before the elections. And I saw that many people, they are visiting and they are reading the biography of people. And suddenly I saw 2 groups of students and they say, oh, you see, this is the person that he is candidate. Come here. And they stopped me and no, we want you to sit with us and to tell us why we should vote you. And it was the most joyful when they started to ask me actually that why I should vote you. So, and I'm happy that through this discussion, some of them, they said, okay, we will vote you. But some of them said, no, we will not vote you. So it was really joyful. And also that is important to answer the questions. That's the most important. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yonous. I really I want to say congratulations on your election campaign. 20,000 votes is no small amount of things, and the way that I always see it is it's 20,000 people who believed in you and what you were saying, and especially if you're going out there and saying don't vote for me just because I am Yonous, that I have come from Afghanistan and you're supportive of that, but vote for me because you believe the things that I'm saying and the way that I want to lead. I think it's a really great testament to the work that you're doing. I have a question, and maybe I will start with Yonous, but maybe others want to kind of come in on it. And it's something you've all kind of discussed, and it's come up from one of the Q&A, I think is from Esther. This idea about like, how do we have more meaningful inclusion? And I want to also maybe pick on a little bit this idea that Yonous was bringing here at the end of like working with other communities that we know are politically disenfranchised. So if I look at Ireland, it's not just migrant communities that are lacking, you know, the voice and the engagement from political parties. It's not just migrant communities, also working class communities. And I'm sure that this is true in other countries as well. It's sometimes people with disabilities, or in some spaces, it's maybe more rural that feel left out of the political conversation than urban. You know, so there can be different reasons why people feel politically disenfranchised. But I guess, how do we achieve more meaningful inclusion? Like, what are the steps that we want to take to ensure that? Is it focusing with political parties, or is it something else? So I leave it open to all of you, but maybe Yonous, if you have any thoughts first, if you want to come in.
Sorry, I was muted. I think through the discussions that now we had, through what Teresa and San was that told us, actually we can understand that actually, in order to achieve a meaningful inclusion, it means that we should come over these barriers that we have. The first, we should start from our communities. I think it was very important to speak about the raising awareness. It was really crucial, not just complaining about the system, and also really there is the lack of raising awareness, and the lack of, even sometimes we have people that they don't know how to vote. If even people, they don't know if they have the right to vote. I have seen this with my experience, that people for many years that they had the right to vote, but they didn't vote, never, and they didn't know how to vote. And even I remember that when I spoke with some people, when they for the first time they were with migrants and refugee backgrounds, so they tried to vote for me, but they didn't know how to vote. And actually, they tried to put this card campaign of myself inside this box. So I remember this, that I had such experiences. So I think raising awareness, mobilizing communities about how to be active citizens, and to understand the rights. It is really important to know very well the rights and obligations in the society very well. It is the first point. And then of course, how to improve the capacities of in the communities, and also how to make leadership. It is the program that we had, and this summit that Teresa said, and so many other programs are running for training leadership. I think it is something that we should do that. And of course, to not forget that we should have discussions with political parties. That is the thing, that they should accept this, that it is important, the inclusion of all parts of the society in decision-making process. That is very important. And at the end of the day, it is the right to vote. It is of course, it is one of the most important right to participate in democracy. It is strengthening democracy. So in some countries, this right doesn't exist. So we have peoples in some countries that they have been born and grown up and they don't have the right to vote. So in countries like Greece and some other European countries, that peoples that they have been grown up in a cities, and they don't have the right to vote for local elections, at least for local. Okay, for national and European, you need the citizenship. Of course, the citizenship also, how we can come over these problems. Look, I think how to strengthen the sense of belonging and how to explain that how important is this in order to improve our society, in order to make an inclusive and democratic society that everyone should feel that they belong to this society and they belong to this process in the society. So in order to do that, I think everyone should have the right. If you feel the second category of citizens, if I live in a city that I feel that I work, I pay, I do, and my children are going to this park, but at the end of the day, I don't have the right to decide for this park and how it should be. But just the others, they have the right. I think it is really bad feeling. And it destroys the sense of belonging. So it destroys actually this democratic society that we are looking for. Thank you.
Can I add to that? Because this is all so important about especially right to participate, but I also think we need to look at it from the different perspective of all people who are part of that broader ecosystem. We all should be building our self-awareness around how do we occupy the space, how much space we are occupying, what kind of platform we are building, what is the access to the platform that we are building. Are we working in empowering people from the perspective of charity or empowerment? And I think this is very important. When we're talking about building meaningful participation, usually people are saying, oh, we need to build capacity of migrants and refugees to be better, right? But also think about the other side of this coin, which is people who are occupying already certain levels of power. What is their self-awareness around how they interact in the system? So here we have those questions about tokenism. If you are a political party and you are inviting somebody of migrant or refugee background to become a political candidate, you need to ask yourself question. What platform am I building for that person to be actually successful? Or am I only bringing that person to improve their image of our political party? You need to ask yourself a question, how much power am I willing to give up for that person to gain more power and to be more successful? And this is a very difficult question. And we are coming to general elections in Ireland, which means around 30 to 40 local councillors will be elected as TDs, which means we will have 30 to 40 spaces on our local councils to be filled in. And in Ireland, we have this system of co-option, which means that we don't have by-elections for local councils. Political party decides who they're going to nominate to replace that person who went to become a TD. TD for Yonous and Son, this is a member of parliament. This is an Irish term. TD is a member of parliament. So we have an option for co-option. So who are we going to co-opt? And are we going to use those systems that are available for us to increase diversity? Or are we going to put party colleagues who we just think, deserve that because they've been here for many years, but we don't really have an outlook on power dynamics, like what barriers, additional barriers migrants have to become successful in elections. And we know that incumbent councillors have more chances to be successful in future. And when you look at all the councillors who were elected in Ireland, a lot of them of a migrant background who are elected, a good few number of them were co-opted to their first term, and then they went on successfully campaigning and winning second and third term. So these are the questions when we want to talk about meaningful participation. We need to ask ourselves, including us as campaigners, what is my self-awareness around how am I occupying this space, how much space I'm occupying, how much power I'm having, and how am I willing to share this power? But I want to ask these questions, two questions that I want to ask to Son and Yonous, because this is something that I want to learn as well. Son, in Ireland, there is drastic lack of visibility in discussion about inclusion, participation, democratic participation of Eastern European communities. So I wanted maybe to ask you to talk a little bit more about how do you find that space in UK? from the perspective of Eastern European communities within the migrant rights sector, how, the identity politics, how did that play a role in this work that you're doing, and how do you address that? And then a question to Yonous. Yonous, and I've been to Greece and I observe your work, and to those who don't know your work, like what you've built in that space of hostility in Greece is amazing. But I also know that there is a lot of charity approach of especially international organizations, but also local actors coming into your community saying, we're going to teach you this, we're going to teach you that. So what would you like people to remember when they are going to work with vulnerable communities about how to mobilize people for political participation, and how to do it well and how not to do it? So these are my questions.
Can I hop in? Quickly on the point of, well, one, to correct myself when I said about imagination, actually, and on people being political, no, like as people said, people are so political, right? Like people's lives are political, and when you ask the right questions, people know that their lives are affected by politics. It's like divorcing this daily politics from electoral politics. It's people not being able to see solutions or whatever representation or in electoral politics that I find to be challenging. And that's probably partly what Teresa just said, that Eastern European migration is ignored from kind of both the migrant sector as well as democratic discussions in government, and where it is mentioned, it tends to be negative. Well, I mean, during Brexit, it was negative, and now I think people have moved on from criticizing Eastern European migrants to criticize other forms of migration, right? It's just passing the buckets to the next biggest migrant community that you want to make your enemy. But okay, so I think like first to go to look at the migrant sector. This is now when I think about like my conversations with people in the sector, or like when I relate to people in the sector, meaning people that work in this space. I don't know where it's coming from. I kind of worry that on some level we have assigned to Eastern European a kind of whiteness. So this is race-based level whiteness. But racial analysis here is divorced from a kind of the broader analysis in which people understand race as constructed, as linked to class, as linked to other things. So I think on some level, at some point, Eastern European migrants have been lumped with more like migrants from more privileged communities, and that ignores the reality that Eastern European migration in the UK tends to be socioeconomically disempowered, so tends to be in more engaged in more precarious forms of labor, builders, cleaners, etc. So sometimes I can kind of think I wonder if like the reason why we don't discuss Eastern European migration as much is that because we're focused on racialized migration, and as we should be, because current political discourse in the UK is extremely racist, right? Like no doubt, actually we do. But I wonder if like the reason why Eastern European migration is not as included in the migrant sector debate is partly because like at the moment we have to focus on racialized, or on like protecting and building the power of our racialized migrant communities. That's kind of what I wonder at the political level. And I guess like this goes back to the inclusion point too, though, like in what ways do we actually engage or try to engage migrant communities, right? Or like, or women or whoever to be candidates or to run in politics. At the moment, from what I know at the party level, there's very little support for migrants and women and other people to actually train in politics and become politicians. And then there are incredible civil societies schemes that try to get more young people, young women, and young migrants into politics, including my friends who run this program training first-gen migrants to be politicians. So it's not party political in any sense. So the program itself does not tell them what to believe, but it gives them the skills to run, gives them the skills to do canvassing, to do media conversations, to just talk to people, to understand the system. And I think this goes, and like, I know that there's Elect Her, which supports women and gives people a financial stipend too, because ultimately running is expensive if you don't have childcare. You know, there's all of these things. And I think like, if we talk about meaningful inclusion, and that I guess goes back to your point, like meaningful inclusion is not about how we make, not just about how we make the communities that are excluded, how we build their capacity, but as Teresa said, how we ask from people in power to perhaps reassess their space, meaning financial space, right? How much resources they're willing to redistribute. Platform, how much of their platform are they willing to give up, including like when they've been in power for ages, is there time to make space for younger people, for migrants, for people with different views? I mean, this is not like an age necessarily just about an age thing, right? But there's new voices in politics, and there is a sense of like frustration of like the establishment that's been, including, by the way, by politicians. Like I speak to people all the time that I kind of feel like they don't necessarily need to or want to run, or like have met people that maybe would feel like they don't need to be in politics anymore, but worry that like other people wouldn't have a chance, so they just keep going. But then, you know, I feel like especially in the US at the moment, that might be the case, right? Like people are worried that someone like AOC couldn't get the nomination, so then we've got what we have. So it is very much like, okay, what do people in power do? Like, how much do they give up? If we are very genuinely committed to inclusion and not just paying lip service to it, then we have to give up things. The same thing goes with like, you know, when we talk about economic, like reducing inequality, well, that probably is going to require redistribution of wealth. So if you're going to say it, do it. Diversity quotas, you know, all of these things. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, Son, that you mentioned this, and there's some comments in the Q&A about this. It does strike me that the three speakers are coming from very different political systems. So you have Greece with the list system, you have the UK with a proportional representation system, in which it means that there's one candidate elected in whatever area, and then you have Ireland where you have proportional representation but by means of the single transferable vote, and so our electoral area might have 5 seats. And it's mentioned by, I think, Zoe in the comments that parties are running women and migrants, but in unwinnable seats. And it's a well-known factor that, like, you know, a party might run 3 candidates for 5 seats and one of them might be a migrant. But we all know if there's 3 candidates for 5 seats, maybe 1 or 2 of the candidates will get elected, but unlikely that the third will. And often that means that it's the migrant or the woman or the person with a disability who is being tokenized sometimes there is going to make the party look very good for running diverse candidates, but not necessarily get elected. Esther has made a comment of how do we break this barrier of diversity? Diversity is now seen as a factor that is dividing us more. I find that in the election in Ireland, it seems as if it's being used as an opportunity to be seen as integrating, but not really per se. It seems that people want to be seen as inclusive in the picture, but we have a long way to go to achieve full representation, especially in Ireland. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, I would be interested to hear. If there's nothing jumping out, I have a slightly other kind of comment that's come in, and it was a question that I had. Zoe had mentioned that disenfranchised means that people are not registered to vote, that voting should be an opt-out and automatic when you get your citizenship, when you register as an asylum seeker, when you're a person that moves or transfers council houses, when you engage, when they buy a residential house, when a person turns 18 or in school, like many life stages, people can automatically be registered to vote and they get to be franchised. I had a question. I lived at one point in Belgium, and there is it's mandatory to vote. So you can face fines, things like this, if you have not used your right to vote when election time comes around. I'd be interested to know how you would feel that would work if more countries brought in something like that, where there was mandatory voting. Do we think that that would be better for migrant communities in terms of mobilization, or do we think that that would cause other kinds of problems?
Abi, before we answer this question, there was also a question for Yonous from myself about, yeah.
Apologies. Sorry, Yonous, apologies.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. It is the issue of meaningful participation. I think it is the first, as you said, that unfortunately, the approach, the kind of approach to the migrants and refugee communities is that it is approach to a vulnerable or a group of beneficiaries. I think that's the problem, and sometimes even the phrases or the words that are used, it is beneficiaries, people of concern. These are the things that actually it is used even by most of the organization. I think it is one of the I can say the barrier that we face. What we were struggling, actually, what we are struggling now is that the communities should be considered as parts of society with responsibilities and also with the rights, with the same rights with others. That is the thing. Of course, everyone can be found in a vulnerable situation because of some incidents, war, conflict, climate crisis, or we have experienced very well. We had the COVID-19 crisis, so we know that everyone can be found in these positions, but it doesn't mean that this incidents that can how can I tell you that can make you a person without any skills or disability or something like this. So these are the kinds of approach that we have, and for me, capacity building, it is actually believing on the skills and capacities of people themselves. It is not that bringing other things or to teach some things. It is, I think, giving more opportunities actually for the people in order for themselves to use their skills and opportunities. Of course, it is need of upskilling, upgrading because of the situation, because of the technology, everything that we need upgrade for computer, we need for everything we need. Of course, there is need, but it doesn't mean that you are facing people's that they don't have skills. I think it is the biggest problem that we have. The second thing is, I think that we should shift the discussions. Most of the time when we speak about in different discussions, when we speak about integration, when we speak about inclusions, the only thing that we have in mind, and we see that as a panel, that they are speaking about job market, about documentations. Of course, these are the very important factors for inclusion, but it is not inclusion, it's beyond that. Actually, I was last week in a discussion in Brussels that the name of the panel was Inclusion and the improvements in legal improvements in European policies on inclusion and integration. But the discussions was actually that the need for labor market for workers actually in the society, and also how many funds that comes from the European Commissions for tackling black markets or like this. So it is, for me, it was really, I was feeling really very bad that we think that migrants, when we speak just for job market, means that like a machine that go to work and come back. It doesn't mean it is people. Inclusion means about rights, about social rights, about everything that you should have, equal rights and equal responsibilities. I think it is also something that very often I face in different discussions, not just in Greece and everywhere, that we mix this. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonous.
Abi,
Teresa?
can I address that question about the
Sure.
automatic registration? Obviously, each country has a different method and model for voter registration. In Poland, it's automatic. When you are 18, you are automatically registered. You don't have to think about it. However, the problem with migrant communities is because voting is so connected to the perception of citizenship. A lot of migrants always automatically assume that you have to be a citizen to be eligible to vote. So if we have automatic registration, we are losing the opportunity to educate people that it's different, because we need to divorce voting rights from citizenship and bring closer voting rights as an essence of democracy. I write about it in my blog, Migrant Vote. I invite everyone to subscribe and read. But the thing is, like, so if we have automatic registration, we are losing the opportunity to teach people that actually voting is not about citizenship, but it's about democracy. So it's not about automatic registration, it's about improvement of civic education. So my colleague Handa Gonchiabamba is Mongolian. She was registering people here to vote. Now she's in Mongolia. In Mongolia, there are voting for a general elections, and she's tweeting constantly about what is the process in there. And one of the things that she said today in her tweet was that every teacher in high school and every community worker is obligated to provide information and provide support in voting system, in voting process. Why could we not do that? Why can we not include civic education amongst all elements of our social and civic life? So if you are going to apply for social housing, that officer should also inform you about your voting rights. If you are going to the doctor should inform you about your voting rights. So I would say to enfranchise communities, we need to make civic education as part of every daily activity and involve all civic servants, whether they are teachers or they are doing any other work, as the information point for people.
Can I into
Please.
First to kind of disagree in the sense, by the not to disagree. I think we should have automatic voter registration, and we should also do continuous civic education, right? Like at the moment, voter registration is just this like unnecessary hurdle. It like is super time consuming, financially consuming. If it's done by charities, it has to be like non-partisan when we can do, and it usually the funding comes around electoral moments, or so there's this like big push around the time when there's an election rather than like actually this like continuous process. So I think we should just have automatic voter registration. I do not think in the UK we should have compulsory voting, at least one that attaches to it a punitive system. I don't believe in punitive systems very often in general, but I worry in particular that this would affect communities that are already on the sharpest ends of the political system, right? So I think a punitive system is not something that at the moment, with where kind of how much people are democratically engaged in the UK, would work. I like the point about civic education being done by teachers and every like civil servant and things like that. I do believe, though, also in just like a rebuilding of democratic structures across the board, from trade unions to community associations to like parent school boards and all of these things, where like all aspects of our life are democratized and we are included in making decisions in all of these things, where we are taught that what happens in our neighborhood. And so I grew up in the Czech Republic, and like we had a tenants association in our building. So my mom every like 3 months would show up to this meeting where like representatives from each block would discuss like whether we should buy a new boiler and things like that. And I think like we really need to build back power in communities across these boards for us to actually genuinely make decisions and be informed about what's going on, and like and that these things are not just individualized, because I worry that if it's purely just like doctors and things like that and like random moments of your life telling you to register to vote, that it just becomes this like weird thing. Whereas like the fact what goes on in your housing estate or in your block matters to you. What goes on in your neighborhood matters to you. You live there, you go there, you decide about it. I fully agree about like on the point about divorcing voting from citizenship, and like ideally like we'd have a system in which like voting rights are residence-based, because ultimately it's the people that live there that are affected by the decisions. Though we might also want to think about like how decisions made here affect people like everywhere, and yet they have no say over that, right? So in what, like if we're talking about like democracy as like decisions that affect you should be made by you, then how do we think about it at a global level when like climate change and like wars and mass displacement affects people? I would perhaps just say, like, to not make it too difficult, I would say that people that don't even live in the country that have the citizenship having the right to vote when I, who have been here for 10 years, don't, is to me like a baffling response. So clearly voting rights should not be a citizenship-based thing as much as they, at the very least, residence-based.
Thank you, Son. I think it's a really important point, and one that I find very troubling in Ireland, actually, because one of the things that citizenship voting rights gives you is the right, among other things, to vote in referenda. And we have had some very major referendum in Ireland that are affecting people's daily lives. So I mentioned earlier the one around who gets to be a citizen, whether they're born here or whether it's because they have family members that have citizenship. So that was a major one. My political education started from a very young age, but my very first like heavy memory of political engagement was the divorce referendum in Ireland when I was a kid. And it was the one where I was really small. I was about 6 or 7 and I was in the count space for it. But it was the one where I felt, oh my God, that's something that people should be able to do. If they don't want to be married anymore, they should be able to divorce and separate and have their lives apart. And this was a really important thing. And if there was a non-citizenship way of people being able to vote in referendums, it's for me something that I think could be a really a tool for engaging people around voting, because referenda in Ireland is so important to how we live our lives often. So yeah, I really find it very fascinating, this idea that we divorce citizenship and voting rights. I see a couple of other comments coming in here, and I would like to get to them. Carly has made a comment about saying it can be very difficult to encourage women and migrant candidates to run, with many feeling the abuse that they receive would be too much, and also issues around confidence. Women feel they may not be qualified enough, and people where English is not their first language worry that they will be at a disadvantage. I think government must provide funding to organizations seeking to encourage candidates from different backgrounds and to political parties so that they can provide additional supports. What are your thoughts around this? And maybe particularly, I think, Yonous, you referenced your own experience of running, but also, San, I had heard you mention that there was maybe some programs in the UK that people were trying to train people and like prepare them for running. So maybe if people would like to comment here, that would be great.
So in my opinion, I think something the communication is something that which is the basic when you are involving in such campaigns or participating in political campaigns. So if you have problem with language, I think it is the biggest problem that you have. I think one of the powerful point that actually I could get vote from people, it was that actually I could speak very well Greek, the language. It means that I could communicate very well, and it was the point that really gave me a good step. So I think the language is the most important things. And also the issue in Greece, it is much more different than other countries. You are speaking about the right to vote in local elections that we don't have. And in order to run as a candidate in elections, it means that you have citizenship. In order to get citizenship in Greece, it is not easy. If you don't have a certificate of language, if you don't have a certificate of all this history of Greece, which is not so easy history as well. So of course you cannot get also citizenship. It means that You should learn much more than even what I have learned in my citizenship process, that I'm sure Greeks themselves, they don't know. So it is really difficult. So I think the issue of language is mostly when you are speaking about the right to vote in local elections, that for people that they are not living for a long time and they have the right to vote, which is really important. And then you should speak, of course, on that time about the language.
I so echo what you said, Carly. I mean, I don't know why migrant communities, women, queer people would go into politics, given the abuse that they get, both by the parties, their colleagues, or future colleagues, and by the people, right? I mean, on some level, yes, I'm like, ooh, we need more programs to encourage migrants, women, and people, young people into politics. But on another, I'm like, well, I personally couldn't. And we saw that recently. I mean, in the UK, Dan Abbott has really been getting like the brunt of it, like specifically kind of racism against Black women, you know, so there's all of that. So that's super difficult. I mean, so I think like on some level, better standards in politics, right? And like how people can actually talk about each other, and also like recognizing patterns of potentially like racist behavior at like the structural level, meaning things like appointments and all of those things need to be acknowledged. I think, so on the programs that I mentioned, there's 3 that I know of. There's Elect Her, which focuses on getting women to become candidates, as well as this campaign called 50-50. There's Migrant Democracy Project, who do it for first-generation migrants. And now there is a new one, I think, called Elect Youth. All of these groups provide training funding to help people outside of the party system to run as MPs. And they are very frank that like people might face abuse, right? Like people, yeah. But I don't know if like, I think the government should fund it. I don't know if government funding comes with like conditions. If it doesn't, if it's just like really good funding, then great. If it does come with conditions, then not so great. Like, so I'd rather this be like government, institutional, rather than party-based, right? Like, I don't think parties should just decide by themselves and then it becomes tokenistic. I think we should have a real concerted effort to get people that are underrepresented, whether it's people with disabilities, women, whoever, and that needs to be funded, good training, all of that.
I don't think it is difficult. I'll just notice Yonous has to go, so thank you, Yonous. Whenever you need to go, and we continue the conversation for a few more minutes. I don't think it's difficult to convince migrants and women to run. One of the proof is that every year, every election in Ireland, we have twice as many migrants or people of migrant background running for elections. So there is definitely their interest, and majority of election candidates of a migrant background who run this year were women. So I don't think it's difficult. It's difficult to convince people. It's difficult for people to win seats, and that's where we need to improve. And those programs that Son mentioned are crucial for helping people understand those unspoken rules of politics. A lot of candidates who run this year run as independents because they were not selected by their political parties, so they had to run as independents. And then also a lot of candidates had to change their election strategies because of the violence. So they limited canvassing, they limited posters because they were afraid that this might cause harassment, violence. So I think it's not about convincing people, but creating protective programs and structures that will, first of all, help people understand unspoken rules, because as a person who was not born in this country and didn't grow up in this system, sometimes it's difficult to navigate those nuances, unspoken rules. So funding for organizations who are running those programs, support programs, is essential, but also zero tolerance to violence and harassment. This needs to be across state, but also within political parties, because migrant candidates of migrant backgrounds also experience discrimination, harassment, microaggression within the political parties. So zero tolerance approach in this area is also very important. And I think this is back to the political parties and the government. What are they going? How much are they going to step forward? I mean, how much resources and how much power they're willing to give in to actually build a meaningful platform for people to win those elections? Because in Ireland, we have around 949 seats in local councils. We had just over 2,000 candidates in total, which means 1 in 2 was elected, right? But we had over 120 candidates of a migrant background, only 20 were elected, which means when you are a person of a migrant background, your chances to be elected are suddenly lower because you are 1 in 6. So again, it's not about putting up candidates, it's about making sure that they are winning those seats, because that is building confidence for future candidates.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm conscious of time. We have about 8 minutes left, and I see that Catherine Joseph has her hand up, wanting to, I think, speak. So I'm going to let you in to speak in a second, Catherine. Just before that, I wanted to kind of read out a couple of comments that have come in, particularly around this topic. Zoe has spoken about a barrier to women running is all the male violence, the microaggressions, being shouted at, belittled, had posters interfered with in front of my face, had Ireland is my country shouted at me, and up the row, which for son, I don't know if you understand that means up the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. One male candidate tried to intimidate me 3 times at the RDS, which is where the counting for votes happens in Dublin. And their mother came over to have a go at me. The standard of behavior is low in politics. Megan has said that once migrants are inside political parties, we are looking to affect change from within. This through joining party executives, establishing networks and pushing for recognition. Government funding could be directed to parties if they support these internally, these positions and these efforts internally, perhaps. And so that's a really interesting point. And Zoe again has kind of spoken about her experience as a woman candidate. I also had 2 instances of different male local government employees having a go at me during a campaign about elements of my campaign, and that is legal, which is true, and rules were just optional during that election campaign, and so we saw it. Sorry, Teresa.
Yeah, I just want to, because there was also one particular question I want to address about which migrant community has the largest registration rates. So the problem is that we don't have any data because there is nobody collecting the data, and which is appalling because we have now Electoral Commission and hope that they will take on that role. But for example, we don't have data how many, apart from academics who are doing that on their own behalf, or civil rights, civil organizations like Immigrant Council, we don't have official data how many women run for local elections, how many men. We don't have official data how many people who run for local elections are identifying as ethnic minority members. We don't have official data about other issues that are important. And we don't have official data about registration within migrant communities. This is very easy to find because if you ask for information, every local council, they have that information. They can tell you exactly how many migrants and which nationalities registered. From anecdotal evidence, and if you look at the number of election candidates of a migrant background, we know that certain communities are much more engaged. So for example, the biggest number of candidates were from African countries. For some reason, we have very little candidates from Poland, and this is the biggest migrant group in Ireland. We only had 3 candidates from South America this time, and they were for the very first time running from this region. So these are crucial information, and this is the duty of the government to collect that data. But we also have to ask questions. Why certain communities have lower rates of participation? What is happening there? We need to ask this question, but in order to ask this question, we need to have that data, and this is the responsibility of the government. And political parties should also publish official data, how many members they have who are women, how many members are who are identifying as members of different minorities. That's important. That is important public information.
I echo this the gap thing. In the UK, what we know is that white other is the most unregistered group, underregistered group. White other, I strongly suspect, is probably Eastern European, given that it's only EU citizens really, aside, that can vote in local elections, right? So just in terms of like who can vote and then who's white, probably Eastern European, but yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Son. Okay, Catherine, I'm going to unmute you and allow you to come in and ask a question, or I've allowed you in and you can unmute yourself if you have something you'd like to input.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really, really brilliant discussion. And I apologize for joining late, but I was just like really amazing because these are the kind of things that I was looking for to even hear from anyone. Abby, you made a really good point about the fact that in Ireland, people were just trying to look like they were inclusive and diverse rather than just even doing the work properly. And so on also, I totally agree that there should be a system in Ireland that people just get registered to vote once they pass 18. That will actually solve a lot of problems with getting people to register to vote. Because the reason the migrant people have very little chance of getting elected is that in Ireland there's a system where the same people vote for the same people all the time. And there's a huge culture around that. So the only way to combat, to be able to have that fighting chance for migrant people is to register people when they clock 18, and everybody just know this is something you have to do. So people will all go out. Well, we have only 50% of people voting in elections. That doesn't represent the huge number of people in the community. So those kind of things can change by just having people register automatically, and it should be mandatory for people to participate in a process like that. Another huge thing as well is I want to see a time that we stop funding, we stop throwing money at problems, that we start looking at the practical solutions instead of going and saying, look, we need funding to do this. There were so many funding given to political parties and organizations before this local election. And what happened was that some of those money, we actually saw that it was being used for the same tokenism. So I think the best way to deal with things like this is to, give those, when you have a process where people can register like that and you have everybody participating in the local election, you give direct, how will I call it now, that there will be a really independent, it should be in the hands of the government to, empower people that are coming out to vote. And see, the process of voting in Ireland, I'm really telling you, from my own experience recently, I'm shocked because all the people in the counting place are council staffs. They are council staffs who are already very familiar with the councillors and all the sitting representative. They are people that, even from the onset of trying to get yourself to go on the nomination, to even submit your nomination paper was so difficult for some of us. You have situations where the local medias and the newspapers only work for these same political parties. They exclude you from debates. They go to nursing homes where there are elderly people who are all registered to vote, who can't come out and hear from all the candidates. They exclude you from those kind of representation as well. There's so many ways that they make sure that these things happen. You go to a polling unit in Ireland in 2024, and people are voting with pencils. And those papers are taken into the counting center and they are counted like really with hands. I think that if all this kind of processes that leaves room for so many doubt and so many things that are happening, if those processes can actually be looked at practically and dealt with, it's more implementation than so many talk in Ireland, because a lot of people say things, and political parties, organizations, they say a lot of things, but how are we implementing all of these things we're saying? And who is checking at the end of the day that these things are being implemented? I think that's where the big problem is. So thank you so much. And I just wish that there's somebody somewhere that will start looking into these major issues, or else we never get anywhere. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I think a very important point to finish on, which is that democracy is great, but it also requires that all of us are continuously checking that our democratic processes continue to be democratic. We see that there's some countries in the world, we won't name names, where there is democracy, but there's much voter fraud. There's a lot of gerrymandering. We have it here. There's a lot of financial inputs into politics, and this is a real problem.
Can I just say, we have to be very careful about calling voter fraud in Ireland, because there is a very strong current from the far-right parties copying the US claims, saying that voting has been stolen. There are certain accountability measures that are installed in Ireland. One of them, that counting happens in public. Everyone can go to a voting station and observe the counting, so there will be no suspicion that there was a fraud, because we have to be very careful about making claims about accountability and legality of our voting, because there's been a lot of measures put in place to make sure that this is actually democratic, and we cannot give a power to those who can abuse this claim for the purpose of saying that the voting's been stolen, as it was happening in US. So we have to be very careful about making statements like that.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay, I'm going to take the moment as chair just to say thank you so much to our three speakers, Teresa, Sun, and Yonous, even though he's no longer here with us. It was a fascinating conversation, and you all are doing amazing work. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of the participants who joined and who gave great comments and inputted. As I said earlier, we've recorded the session, so that's going to go on our YouTube channel, and we'll send around links at that point in time, so that if anyone missed part of the conversation, or you want to look back at this or our earlier webinar last week, that you're more than welcome to do so. And yeah, this is not the end of our discussion. It's a discussion we continue to have, but it's the end of our chat for today. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.